For you players, if you've ever been called overlapped or out of position, hopefully this video will help you better understand why that might have been. And then also just the different, little nuance or details that will really help you understand how to make sure that you stay in rotational order, how you ensure that you don't commit out of rotation or positional faults. And at any rate, we'll use this video as a way to further our understanding. Okay, so what we're looking at here on the far side, the team in the white jerseys, is your, I would say, a typical rotation 1 serve receive formation. Unlike what we've been doing with our 14s team is practicing rotation 1 where our hitters are split. Here is an example of what we would call the hitters all being stacked left. Okay, now I know obviously as we're watching this video and looking at the film, you can see these 3 hitters over here that are all stacked along, each other. They're to our right, but relative to the court position for them, it's their left, right? Left front, left back. So they're stacked left, closest to their left sideline. Okay. So that's what we call stack left. In practice, if you hear me say, hey, stack left, this is what I'm talking about. Now, this is a pretty interesting, not your typical route that you're going to see this hitter here take, but it's one of the options that they can use to get their hitters in position to hit by their primary position that they play. So I'll play it for you, and then I'll go into more detail on some of the things that I want you to know and understand. So they're running a 4-1 and a C, or a go 1 and red. Didn't score on first ball, got into transition and got blocked. Okay, so what are we looking at here? A couple things that I want to point out here, okay, is you're going to notice this player's foot right here. Now, her heel is up off the ground, so the part of her foot in contact with the floor is actually inside the line or inside the boundary of the court. So that's good, okay? There's this funny little rule, okay, that says all 6 players, well, first you have to have 6 players on the court at the moment the ball is served, but all 6 of those players must also be standing completely inside the boundaries of the court. Now, the line is part of the boundary, okay? Just like if the ball hits the line, it's in. Your foot can be, and it looks like her foot is, slightly in contact with the line. That is legal. If her heel were to be down and crossed over partially outside of the court, technically, I think that would be illegal. And if one of the referees here wanted to, they could call a positional fault against this team for one of the players not starting inside the court. Okay, what are the other things I want you to notice? These are the front row players. Okay, all hitters are stacked here, and these are the back row players. So let's flip to another slide here, and I'll show you what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is rotation 1, okay? Down here at the bottom is the net, and here are your front row players. Now, a typical, again, you'll hear me say a typical formation, especially in American volleyball, it's going to follow this order: setter, outside, middle, opposite, outside, middle, okay? The reason I've numbered these players here, that'll be something that will, come in later. But essentially what we're doing is we're talking about the outside hitter 1 is 1 position away from the setter. The middle blocker 1 is, again, 1 position away from the setter. The middle blocker 2 and the outside hitter 2 are 2 positions away from the setter. Okay, and the opposite is Well, that's easy. It's opposite of the setter. Okay. So again, in order, your typical lineup's going to go setter, OH1, middle blocker 2, opposite, OH2, and middle blocker 1. What I want you to look at here is this image. Okay, the serve-receive formation that this team, ASU, has used is this here. And I've underlined the front row players. Here's what they've done. Remember, outsides are going to hit and pass. So this front row player is going to come over here and pass. Now, in rotational order, service lineup order, she's right up next to serve. Okay, so watch what happens here. As this player drops back to pass, these other two players must also now move over. Okay, so that we stay in lineup or service, or what they call rotational order. Okay, setter's going to serve, followed by the outside 1, middle blocker 2, and then the opposite. So here's your setter. She just served. Next in line is going to be the OH1, followed by the middle blocker 2. There she is, followed by the opposite there. Okay. And you can see that again, we're stacking these players here on the left side. They have to stack to stay in rotational order. And we would do that if we want this player to pass and immediately hit here on the outside. Okay. If that wasn't a huge priority for us, all right, we could do what we've been doing in practice this last week, is just have this player come back and pass here. Okay. And then these players wouldn't have to bunch up and stack. In fact, they could spread out like we were doing in practice. And again, these players up here, you know, one, you want to stay out of the way so you're not blocking these other passers. And also you want to be useful. Okay. So if the ball gets served short and nobody else can really get to it, you know, help us out, be useful, and pass when necessary. Okay. The other thing that I want to point out here is your corresponding front and back row players. Okay. Now we've talked about this in practice, right? You have your corresponding front and back row player. So even though you don't play the same position, right? Your corresponding front and back row player just has to do with the rotation that you're in and who happens to be in the what's a good way to put this, in the corresponding area similar to you. I don't know. So for example, left front, their corresponding rotational player is going to be left back. Middle back, their corresponding rotational or positional player in this moment is going to be middle front. Okay. Right front and right back. All right. Now, again, as we rotate to the next rotation, these positions are going to change, right? So let's go ahead and just rotate everybody. I'm no longer doing serve receive down here. I'm showing you what the next rotation 2 would look like. Okay. So if this is rotation 2, right, for service order, the outside 1 is going to serve, followed by whoever's right up next in right front. Okay. MB2. All right. You can see here that your corresponding, I guess, area player, right? Area as in like right front, right back, middle front. Notice how now in this rotation, your corresponding opposite is not your opposite as in we play the same, you know, specialty position as in middle blocker or outside or setter and opposite, right? Hopefully that's not too confusing, but again, like these are going to be important to know because now when we set up our serve receive formation, the front row players must always be closer to the net than their corresponding back row player. Okay, so if, for example, we wanted to do something crazy and have this middle 2 come back and pass, right? Now, depending on where we make this person go, we have to ensure that this little overlap, the slightest little bit, needs to be obvious to the referee that the front row player is in fact standing closer to the net than her corresponding back row player. Okay? If you really want to know the rules, which would be cool, you can be even. Even is not considered a positional fault or an overlap because neither one of you is closer to the net than the other. Okay, so that's fair play. But, you know, why risk it? Okay, make sure that it's obvious that you are in positional or in the correct position and rotational relationship to your corresponding front or back row player. Okay, so how does this look in real life? Remember, we've dropped this outside who's right up next to serve. Okay, it's going to be difficult for me to draw a straight line, but if I can get it straight enough, we're going to look and see if her setter, who is her corresponding back row player, I really hope you guys are with me. See? Right? Rotation 1. Here's the outside. We've stacked her left to drop back and pass. This outside one must be closer to the net than her corresponding back row player, which happens to be the setter in this rotation. What do you think? That's a pretty straight line that I drew. Okay, whose foot or feet? No, whose foot? It doesn't matter, both feet. One of your feet in contact with the ground, okay, for the front row player must be closer to the net. Here's the center line. Here's the net. I think you guys would agree that yes, this outside hitter is closer to the net than her corresponding back row player. All right. Many of you might not really know that detail. You know, you might be thinking that the overlap has to do with these two players here. It doesn't. These two players are both back row. So neither one of them needs to worry about who's closer to the net than the other. That only has to do with your corresponding front row player. Okay, so let's check the other positions. Who else would be back? I mean, it's obvious to me, right? These are the three back row players. Let's go back to this drawing here. The middle blocker 1, who has probably been substituted with a libero. That's common. It's not required by the rules, but it's what's most common. Let's make sure that this middle blocker or libero is closer to the end line than her corresponding front row player, who's the middle. Yeah, that's pretty obvious, right? So here's the libero, right, who's come in for that middle blocker. Here is her corresponding front row player. We know that because she's standing in the middle of these two other front row players, right? Okay, so who's closer to the net? I'm not going to draw the line. We can just use this 10-foot line. Boom, easy. Okay, so they're in rotational positional order. The other back row player. Okay, let's go back to our sheet. Okay, outside hitter 2 could sometimes be substituted by a DS. Okay, if this outside's not very strong at passing, or just our DS happens to be stronger at passing than this player. Okay, we would use a defensive substitution, defensive specialist, and sub her in. Okay, so she needs to be closer to the end line than her corresponding front row player, who happens to be the opposite. And, you know, also vice versa, the opposite must be closer to the net than this outside hitter 2, or DS. So let's take a look. What do you think? Pretty easy, right? Definitely this opposite is closer to the net. She's almost touching the net than her corresponding back row player. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm only going to do this rotation because this video has already gotten to be quite long, but we'll play it one more time. You know, this is eventually some of the stuff that we could do. Now, I don't think we have a lefty on our team here, so we probably wouldn't do this. in practice, we're talking about hit and stay and then switch. Well, we don't need two hitters to both hit on the outside, right? And certainly this team doesn't want to do that. They want to get their lefty as quickly as possible to go hit on her primary specialty position, which is in right front. We don't need her to stay, so she can switch right away because we already brought our outside over here to hit where she normally hits. Okay. So again, we don't need two people doing the same thing. That would be ridiculous. All right. And there you have it. Your outside's hitting outside. We like that. Your middle's hitting somewhere here in the middle, right? And then we had our opposite hustle and really run quickly so she could get over there and hit this back set, which is what they wanted to do. I know that ended up being a tip there, but anyway, that's some rotational stuff for y'all. I hope that helps, and I apologize that it was such a long video, but again, the more we learn this stuff, the more we'll be able to play games and practice and prepare for our tournament. And also, knowing the rules will help you focus more on the game so that you're not distracted by, thinking, well, am I in the right spot or not? You won't have to turn to the sideline to get instruction from the coach. You'll know that you're in the right position, and then you'll be able to focus on, the more relevant competitive stuff, concentrating on the serve, the pass, the offense, the offensive play, all that kind of stuff. If we're being distracted by not knowing the rules, that's going to cost us. And it's not to say that won't happen, but let's not let that happen a lot. Okay, because then it's not our opponent that's beating us. It's our lack of understanding of the rules of the game and us simply being distracted that's beating us. Okay, if we get beat, we want it to be because we played a good, hard-fought game and our opponent just played a little bit better than we did. Okay, we can live with that. We can be, if we're losing because we don't understand the rules of the game and we're distracted and we're not able to just play freely, then we certainly won't be playing at the best of our ability, and that'll be frustrating. All right.